Alleluia, 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 alleluia. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Those who follow me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Alleluia. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the first chapter. Glory to you, Lord. Jesus left the synagogue at Capernaum and entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law lay sick with a fever, and immediately they told him of her. And he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and the fever left her, and she served them. That evening at sundown they brought to him all who were sick or possessed with demons, and the whole city was gathered together about the door. And he healed many who were sick with various diseases, and cast out many demons, and he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. And in the morning, a great while before day, he rose and went out to a lonely place, and there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him pursued him, and they found him and said to him, Everyone is searching for you. And he said to them, Let us go on to the next towns, that I may preach there also, for that is why I came out. And he went throughout all Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and casting out demons. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to the Lord Christ. Grace, peace, and much joy to you, people of God. It's a continuation of the day we heard about in last Sunday's Gospel, started hearing about. Jesus enters the synagogue at Capernaum. He teaches with authority, and with authority he drives out an unclean spirit, setting to rights the holiness of the place. And then, right after church, he goes to the home of Simon and Andrew, brothers, with the 4 apostles, the 4 disciples that he called in the gospel from 2 weeks ago, only to discover that Simon's mother-in-law is sick. He takes her by the hand and lifts her up. The verb is actually egiero, one of the 2 verbs used to describe the resurrection. It's a sort of a foreshadowing of the resurrection. That he takes her by the hand and lifts her up, and she rises to serve them. And then the sick are healed in the evening, and then prayer before sunrise, and then on to the next town. All of this in one day. It is as Isaiah said, those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength. They will run and not be weary. They will walk and not be faint. Jesus is authoritative and healing and an example of the kingdom drawing near to the whole town, and prayerful and faithful to his mission, all in one 24-hour period. Jesus' identity is revealed to us in his mission. His mission is to preach the kingdom. He says, that is why I came out. And the Apostle Paul's mission is to preach the gospel of Jesus. That is the point of his calling, his vocation. He describes himself in good Lutheran terms as the perfectly free with respect to all, and yet perfectly enslaved for the sake of all, servant of God. For it is not just the one on the mission whose identity is revealed. The mission reveals the identity of the one who sent, Jesus. The one who sent Paul. The one who sends us. The marvelous portrait of God in Isaiah 40, in his transcendence and immanence. And in our psalm, too, most clearly, he's the one who calls all the stars by name. Not one of them is missing. Look at all of these, says Isaiah. And he is the one who lifts up the lowly, the one who heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. He is the God who sits above the circle of the earth, whose ways are unsearchable, before whom the rulers of the world are as naught. And yet he is the one who renews the strength of those who wait on him, such that those he calls to his mission will run and not be weary, and walk and not be faint, renew their strength, as Jesus himself does. All of his activities on behalf of others in this 24-hour period, and yet right in the middle of it is his going off by himself to a lonely place before sunrise to pray. That is how his strength is renewed, by his communion with the Father in the Spirit. That is what strengthens him to go about the mission. The reason he came out, as he says, to be the kingdom drawing near, as Jesus indeed himself is, as he raises up people to serve, to be the perfectly free lords of all and the perfectly enslaved servants of all. In that wonderful paradoxical existence that we Christians have in our participation in this mission. One of the interesting paradoxes in St. Mark's Gospel is the way the demons and unclean spirits, Jesus' spiritual adversaries, recognize him and know who he is, and recognize what he's about, that his mission is a threat to them. While Jesus' human followers, even his inner circle, seem to be mostly clueless about who he is and what he's really all about. And perhaps we shouldn't be surprised by that. Paradoxes are hard to understand. And even here already in the first chapter of Mark's Gospel, we have that misunderstanding beginning. Because after Jesus has taught with authority and rectified the holiness of the holy place, the synagogue, by casting the unclean spirit out, and raised Peter's mother-in-law up, lifted her up in a sign of the resurrection to come, and healed and cleansed everyone who was gathered around the door of Peter and Andrew's house in Capernaum as a sign of the kingdom drawing near, a sign of the wholeness that we will all enjoy when the kingdom comes in its consummation. After all this, when he goes off to be in communion with the Father and renew his strength, everyone goes looking for him. They pursue him, they track him down, they hunt him down. Is it because, as we will hear in next Sunday's Transfiguration Gospel, that they sort of want to build booths and keep on reliving this great day of all these wonderful things that Jesus has done. In any case, Jesus is interested in continuing the mission, in going on to the next towns. Just as St. Paul is interested in going on to the next place. His mission is to spread the gospel from Antioch all the way to Rome. It's the commission he's been given, to be all things to all people he encounters. Perfectly free, perfectly enslaved, all for the sake of the mission. Are we called to that as well? We're not really in a position to take people by the hand and raise them up. And I don't just mean because of social distancing. And we're not really in a position to be all things to all people. St. Paul is an apostle after all, and as far as I know, none of us are really called to that. But we are all called, and we all have a place in this mission. All of us have been lifted up, set free, perfectly free in God's grace, free for service, just as Peter's mother-in-law is raised up and she serves them. This is not because she's oppressed in some way. This is because it's a sign that when we are raised up by God, it is so that we might serve. Perfectly free, perfectly enslaved. This is the God who sits over the circle of the earth, the God who calls all the stars by name, the God who lifts up the lowly, who heals the brokenhearted. So transcendent, so immanent, so beyond us, so intimate with us, that the paradox by which he has called us is so that we might have our own identities revealed in the mission that reveals him. Jesus is going on to the next town, and so is Paul. And we ourselves, in this week to come, are going on to the next person. Who is it that God will put in your way this week? Probably not so you can preach them a sermon, but there may be some healing word that you can offer. Probably not so that you can do some mighty act, casting out a demon or even healing someone, unless you happen to be in the healthcare business. But there are ways that you too can help to heal the brokenhearted, or simply show by our own lives that we recognize that we have been called by the God who will renew our strength, who will heal our broken hearts, who will, at the last, lift us up and bring us all to the wholeness of the kingdom. That's the gospel that Jesus preached. That's the gospel that Paul preached. That gospel mission, our lives are also part of it. He takes us by the hand and lifts us up so that we too might be perfectly free to serve. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.